All right, welcome back into the Fox 13 live desk. I'm Matthew Smith, bringing you the latest news throughout the day. So we just got word, TMZ now reporting that there has been a plea deal accepted in the Bryan Kohberger trial. So this is huge news that we are working through as a newsroom right now, talking with everybody, trying to get the details. But now a word on him potentially agreeing to plead guilty on all counts.
And welcome back to Docket Decoder. So for today's video, I want us to remember back to early July. If you can remember, we were just weeks before the Bryan Kohberger trial being set to finally begin. But that was when everything changed. Instead of the trial that all of us, and really the whole world, had been waiting to begin, reports began surfacing that Bryan Kohberger might have accepted a plea deal in order to avoid the death penalty. People on both sides, those convinced of his guilt, as well as those certain of his innocence, were left stunned. But as more details emerged and it became clear that he had indeed accepted a plea deal, there was one question that seemed to dominate almost every conversation. What was it that had changed? I mean, up until that point, the defense had never even hinted that a plea deal might be on the table for them. Kohberger's attorneys had repeatedly stated that he was innocent. And one of the very few things we knew Kohberger himself had said was that he was looking forward to being exonerated. But a trial would be necessary for him to clear his name. So why do this now? What forced such an abrupt shift? So the media did what the media does, and they turned to Howard Blum to answer some of these questions about why Bryan Kohberger had changed his mind so abruptly. And Howard Blum, for those of you who have followed the case, I'm sure you're familiar with him and his work, but he's an author and journalist who had literally written the book on the case, having published a book about this case back more than a year before the trial was even set to begin. But the media had certainly looked to him to be the expert, and he was more than happy to go on all the news networks and share his theory, presented as fact, about why Bryan Kohberger had indeed changed his mind and this plea deal had come to be, and in fact that the defense had gone to the prosecution asking for this plea deal. I'm not going to try to explain his theory. I will let him do that in his own words.
His name is Howard Blum, and his article appears in an online newsletter called Airmail.
Dive in this case. He wrote a book, actually. Howard Blum is his name. I've interviewed him before. The name of the book is When the Night Comes Calling, a requiem to the Idaho student murders. He's been following this case from the beginning. He was shocked.
All right, joining us, Howard Blum from the Hamptons, the #1 authority on the Idaho murder case. Bryan Kohberger, the families, everything about this.
Well, fortunately, you know, I like telling stories.
All along, the word had been he's not taking a plea. He wants to go to trial.
What I discovered in the course of my reporting, that early on, Ann Taylor had a sense that this is a case that she would like to get a plea deal. She approached Kohberger and discussed it with him. This was before there was the alternate perpetrator ruling that was ruled out. And he said no, because his mother was insisting that she did not want her son to admit to guilt to these crimes. Maybe she didn't believe he was guilty or whatever. Then it seems, and this is what I've been told, this is what has been suggested to me, that it's a matter of record that after the murders, on 6 a.m., he called for an hour at the parents' home in Pennsylvania at 6 a.m. He spoke with his mother, not his father. It was suggested that the state was now going to call the mother to the stand and want to find out what was said during that phone call. That caused Kohberger, as it was reported to me, a great deal of distress. He did not want this to become public. He also did not want, it was brought up to him, that his father would have to testify perhaps on the stand about what was said during their cross-country trip that I write about in great detail in my book and in the Airmail articles. He wanted that to be kept secret too. So part of the reason I've been told that he finally agreed to okay to tell his team, try to see if we can get a plea deal, was that he wanted to keep his parents from testifying. He didn't want them to be put in a situation that might leave them in some sort of jeopardy, might impugn their reputations in the community. He was trying to protect them. That led
Whoa.
him
Well,
to
that's
make this
interesting.
deal.
What you just said, because I struggled with this yesterday, asking how can a sociopath who takes the lives so easily of four innocents then have empathy for his parents? Like, well, gee, I don't want that. But maybe it's not empathy. It's that I don't want them to be in the position of like going to jail. I'm human being enough to say I don't want them becoming like the parents of that guy down in Florida, Brian Landry, who
Exactly.
killed Gabby Petito. And it was very clear the parents knew what their son had done. They denied it, but they've become the scourges of the nation because it was very clear that they let Gabby Petito's parents suffer while they knew their son had done something terrible.
These are the only anchors he has for the rest of his life in jail. He wants to protect them. If he can get out of this quickly, everyone wants to just get this over with and move on. And that's why I also find so distressing that the judge allowed this gag order to stay in place till after everything is done. So everything that reporters might find out would become ancient history by the time it gets out there. And her problem all along, and this is again reporting I've been doing, her client, Bryan Kohberger, every time he was approached, nixed a plea deal largely because of his mother. His mother was opposed to it. His mother said, we want to have our day in court. She thought somehow that this would all be resolved in her son's favor. Then, after the two latest motions were thrown out, the alternate perpetrator and the alibi defense, something else became clear to the defense team, and they shared this with Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger's mother very possibly could have had to go on the stand and discuss what was said during a telephone call that her son made at 6 o'clock in the morning, Idaho time, approximately 2 hours after the murders. She would have to say what she heard, what was her impression, what she felt her son was talking about. And Bryan Kohberger was told that this could incriminate your mother, perhaps, and perhaps put her in legal jeopardy. And
Wow.
I think that weighed a lot on him. He also was told that his father would be put on the stand and have to discuss what happened during their cross-country trip from Washington State University back to Pennsylvania during the Christmas vacation period of 2022. I discussed this a great deal in my book, What Went On. It's hard to get the specific bits of the conversation, but think about it. Here was Bryan Kohberger's father sitting shoulder to shoulder in a Hyundai Elantra for 4 days with his son. He knows every cop in the country is looking for a white Hyundai Elantra, just like the car he happens to be in. He knows his son lives 10 miles away from the murder scene. He knows his son has had behavioral issues, been a heroin addict. He was concerned enough about his son to want to go out to Washington State. When he first went out there, he went with him, he accompanied him, and now he's driving back with him again, 3 months later. So I think the parents had a sense of what was happening, and they were going to be put on the stand by the prosecution and asked specific questions. And they made it clear, Ann Taylor's team made it clear to Kohberger that might not be a position you want to put your parents in. But fortunately, I like telling stories.
Well, Howard, I'm very glad that you enjoy telling stories. And you're obviously very good at telling those stories because a lot of people have bought and even paid for your stories. But your story this time has a problem. You see, this past week, Judge Hippler finally released a few more documents from the case file. And one of those documents that he released was the list of prosecution witnesses that they plan to call at trial. And, we are finally seeing that list now, but Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger have known who's on that list for a long time. And you know who's not on that list? Bryan Kohberger's mom. So the prosecution wasn't going to be confronting her about that phone call like you talked about. You know who else wasn't on the list? Bryan Kohberger's father. So the prosecution wasn't going to be calling him to the stand and confronting him about what they said on that ride back from Pennsylvania from Washington State. I'm not sure who your sources were, but they were wrong. You know, Howard, as a parent, one of the lessons I'm trying to teach my kids is that we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all get things wrong sometimes. But who defines us as people, who I am as a person, what my character is, really comes down to what do I do with that when I find out that I'm wrong. So I'm curious, Howard, what is it you're going to do now that clearly your story that you just told was wrong? And your story that you told was about other people. And my guess would be your story probably hurt those people. And it was wrong. We know that now. So Howard, my question is, what are you going to do now that your story that you told about other people was wrong? And there's been other things, Howard, that have been shown that you reported about this story that have been wrong. And my guess is, before all is said and done, there's going to be a lot of things that you wrote in your book that we find out are wrong. So what are you going to do when you find out you're wrong? I don't know. That's up to you. But I'm anxiously waiting to see what you and a lot of other people do when we find out things that they said about other people were wrong. Well, thanks for watching. If you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.